back to Fort Worth. Also, the main thing was I had a disc jockey gig, KFAD radio, Arlington, Cleveland, 94.9 FM. One of the best jobs I've ever had. $1.60 an hour, minimum wage. But they had like walls of music, and it was mainly rock and roll. They had a great jazz library too. And I remember Phil Cook, when I signed on and got a job there, he said, here's what you do. Here's where you play the advertisements, and the rest of the time you just play good music and don't screw it up, okay? And that was it. There was no, programmer or someone saying you should play this or that. You could do whatever you wanted, and it was so liberating. Such a great job. Of course, station didn't make any money, and they sold them. They changed the format. I was the last DJ there. I remember playing Mose Allison's "If You Go to the City," and then it became a top 40 station. So I left. Actually, I had my girlfriend come down from, she'd been living in Chicago. She was from Fort Worth. And we took off from Mexico for about, 2 months, driving in a little Volkswagen. Then we had to figure out what else to do. We came back and we worked the Colonial Golf Tournament in the concession tent and made enough money, and I went back to Minneapolis, where I'd gone to the University of Minnesota for a quarter. And I went back there with the idea, I run a record store and I've done radio, I know these things. And I basically weaseled my way into becoming the second manager of a record store called the Electric Fetus in Minneapolis. And if you will, Electric Fetus is celebrating its 52nd year this year. It's a storied, legendary Prince, the performer. The very last tweet he made before he died was he was at Electric Fetus on National Record Store Day. And it was a great legacy story, and I loved it. But I'd gotten this idea that I want to be a writer too, and that was just something that was always in the back of my mind. It's mainly because I had good English teachers at Heights and at Strickland Junior High that always encouraged me. I took some journalism classes. I wrote a gossip column in the Jacket Journal. I didn't like journalism there, but I loved music, and I loved the idea of how communicating with writing went. So I did a big leap of faith. And it was, I'm sitting in Electric Fetus, and I'm homesick. And I write about a Doug Somm album that is released, an obscure Doug Somm album. And I wrote a review and sent it on the fly to Cream magazine, which was a music magazine. And I got back this letter from a guy who was actually a hero of mine named Lester Bangs. He was a writer, and he said, "You write really well. You should write some more for us." And I'm sitting in Minneapolis. It's early May 1973, and it snowed. And the homesickness really kind of got in him. So I just want to say, a little passage here. Lester Bangs' letter motivated me to go back to Texas and write about music. Fort Worth had been a fine place to grow up. After high school, I ran a small record shop called Natural Records and worked at KFAD Radio, a freeform radio station in suburban Arlington, where I was paid $1.60 an hour minimum wage to play anything I wanted from a record library that filled 3 walls. It was a pretty good job, until the station changed its programming to top 40. It was a pretty good reason to wander off to Minneapolis. But after the Electric Fetus, Fort Worth wouldn't do. The Texas I missed so dang much was somewhere where I'd never lived, but a place I already knew I'd enjoy, Austin, where the daylines of those Rolling Stone and Cream articles were coming from, because I was reading a lot about Austin while I was in Minneapolis. And something was going on in Austin. So Chris, my girlfriend then, Chris Cummings is my wife today, 40th wedding anniversary this coming November. Chris and I arrived in mid-August, that time of summer when the sun baked the green grass white. Our friend Don Kroll sublet his 2-room back house behind a 50s vintage bungalow in the avenues of Hyde Park, north of campus. Since Don had arrived in Austin a year earlier, he had forsworn killing all living things, including insects, as some sort of spiritual deal. That's Austin, too. Our first night was spent in the company of cockroaches crawling on the floors, walls, and ceiling. There were 3 times the size of the roaches we'd become accustomed to in Minneapolis. At one point, I tried to swat one particularly noisy roach scurrying across the ceiling, and it flew straight in my face. A roach had never attacked me before. On the morning after our first night, I wasn't so sure about Austin. By day, Austin was a comfortable place to hang out, play in, and explore. A pleasing to the eye marriage of oaks, hills, creeks, a river running through the middle of the city, and Barton Springs, the biggest spring-fed community swimming hole I'd ever seen, all within a mile of downtown. Music, the subject I moved to town to write about, was everywhere. On any given night, there were 5 times as many bands playing around Austin as in much larger Minneapolis. Original and rude sounds were the attraction. Cover bands had little standing. Listening and dancing to music and drinking beer appeared to be some kind of refined pastime. Austin was loose, easy, and cheap. It was fun. Over the course of those first 8 weeks, we went out almost every night. We hit the Armadillo, Split Rail, One Night, Soap Creek, and a dozen other clubs. We heard Greasy Wheels, Frida and the Fire Dogs, Kenneth Threadgill, Doug Somm, Willie Nelson, Jerry Jeff Walker, W.C. Clark, Mance Lipscomb, Lyndon Hopkins, Angela Straley, and Southern Feeling, The Storm, Paul Ray and the Cobras, Bill Neely, Clifton Shear, and loads of other musicians and bands. We were meeting people and dancing and grieving the nights away. The giant roaches of Avenue H were worth tolerating. I'd found my place. My girlfriend liked it too. That was a very important part. So, I agreed to move down, and what I've seen since has been other moments like Eddie Wilson. Let's get together and do a music club. I call this the Austin Big Business Plan. Doing things for all the wrong reasons, but which are really the right reasons. You don't do, money is not the motivation here. At least back then. And after the Armadillo, after music, then come the slackers. Rick Linklater grew up in Huntsville. And he'd come to Austin in the 70s. Even in high school, he discovered a bookstore called Grok Books that had all these metaphysical books that he'd never heard of before. Grok Books today is Book People, the #1 independent bookseller in the southwestern United States. But Rick Linklater came first for books, and then he came for movies. He worked offshore on an oil rig to buy a professional top-shelf movie camera. He wanted to make film. But first he made enough money not only to buy the camera, but to move to Austin, and he could afford to live for 2 years and watch movies, which he did. The first year, he soaked up everything that the university had to show, and the university had a lot of film. It was not mainstream. But the second year, he discovered the university's showing the same films again. Those professors are teaching the same courses. And he'd already seen Godard's Weekend. He wanted to go deeper and see more obscure Godard. So he had met a guy at the Super 8 movie club. Yeah, these are communities. A bunch of guys that like Super 8 cameras, and they're all being in Austin. Well, he met this guy, Lee Daniel, who's a cameraman. And they decided, let's form the Austin Film Society, and we'll just show our own movies. And we'll show stuff that's even more obscure than the university ever imagined, which they did. Today, the Austin Film Society has its own theater. It has its own producer class. It has awarded over $2 million in grants to independent movie makers. And it's not that Rick Linklater is still very hands-on. He's invested. He has there's directors and all that, but he likes input on it. But he started the Austin Film Society not to create an institution for Austin film. And Austin is a global capital of independent film. It's not just a place to shoot film. It's a place where directors live. And it's a place that's got an attitude, an indie attitude for film. Rick Linklater, Mike Judge, Robert Rodriguez, they work on their own terms. Just like the scene that was blown up for music was very indie-oriented. It's always been indie and alternative. The other. And Austin, that place, it's not Hollywood, it's not Nashville. So here comes the Austin Film Society. About the same time the Film Society starts, I remember in the 70s of going to Austin and visiting, it was the first time, even before I moved, I saw health food stores that I'd never seen before, big health food stores. The Good Food store on 5th Street in Baylor was like, it was big. It was not a shop. It was almost as big as Buddy's was here. And within a couple of years, in 1980, I remember I shopped at this one place, Safeway, that this guy John Mackey and his girlfriend started in this old Victorian house off of Rio Grande, and what was it, 8th Street, I believe, 8th or 9th. And that lasted a year or two, and then not far from there, they took over what was the Mother Earth nightclub on 10th and Lamar, and John had compelled a couple other health food stores owners to join him, or else face the consequences of severe competition, and opened up the very first Whole Foods market, which is now, of course, Whole Foods is the biggest #1 organic retailer in the world. And it started with just an idea of growing out of health food stores. And John may have aimed initially to do the Walmartization of health food. I think he had aims, but the whole thing is, this started very humbly in just, one location. People loved it. I tell the story of Patty Lang Fair, who was a manager of the Whole Food store, who's known John since he worked at Good Food Store, and she said, yeah, he's working at Good Food Store just to get trade secrets, because he knew what he was going to do. Well, Patty stayed with the company all the way up till the Amazon sale. And so, it was very interesting, some of the challenges they faced as they grew, but early on, it was more like, one, it was a place where anyone could get a job. If you were different in Austin, a musician, this was one of the few places, other than being a white person, you could get a job. Whole Foods hired everybody. And then there were these ideas, how different could it be? All of a sudden, the matrons from Westlake started coming to Whole Foods. They loved Whole Foods because they loved seeing the things and seeing people look different and all that. And they'd go back to Westlake and tell them, could you believe what I saw there? Well, so there's a big issue internally at Whole Foods about what was colored hair okay. Could people, do pink hair or color their hair? And management was really grappling over this, and Patty said one day I saw, there's Lady Bird Johnson, and she's checking out, so I rushed over to Sack Groceries for her, and I asked her, Mrs. Johnson, what do you think of, the staff with purple and pink hair? And she said, I just love that, it's so cute. And so she went back, and that's how purple and pink hair became tolerated at Whole Foods, thanks to Lady Bird Johnson. Everybody's making something up. Aaron Franklin, who is cited as being basically leading the revival of barbecue as a thing, as an obsession. It's more than just the smoked meat. Aaron Franklin started in a trailer up by 38th and I-35, and I was an early adopter. Used to bother him before lines started. But Aaron Franklin didn't move to Austin to become a barbecue king. He moved to Austin because he wanted to play in bands. Again, these business models keep coming back. He didn't know what he's going to do. He just wanted to play and hang out. And while he's hanging out and playing in all these bands, he starts experimenting with an old smoky, we've all seen those old smoky grills. That's where he got his ideas. And then he went to work for John Mueller, who kind of brought in classic Texas barbecue to Austin for the first time when John was run out of his family business in Taylor for running off with the help. That won't work. But it was okay in Austin. So it's just these stories keep coming through. And since preservation is a theme here, I would be remiss not to mention the impact of South Congress Avenue, which I wrote about for Preservation Magazine about 10 years ago. And the whole idea was the bottom-up preservation of South Congress. Most preservation projects are top-down. This needs to be saved and all that. South Congress was a really gnarly, ratty part of Austin. It was famous for like at least once a year, when every legislative session, there'd be a legislator caught with a prostitute on South Congress. It was not a nice part of town. It was rough. It was the old main highway out of Austin. South to San Antonio until the interstate was built. And it just basically had declined. But what started in really the late 1980s was this bottom-up preservation, starting with this guy, Steve Wertheimer, that was accountant for the state of Texas, a music nut, who used to hang out, and for a while then he took over and leased the Continental Club, and then he bought the Continental Club. The Continental Club is one of these music institutions of Austin today. Just people come just to go to the Continental Club. Doesn't matter who's playing there. Well, Steve did all right. And he started buying other properties on his block. First he bought his business and then bought other properties on his block. Bought the South Austin Barber Shop, this beautiful 1930s building, so he could get haircuts. And so he became a player. He was the first big player. And there was a woman that had come down, she'd come to UT to be a writer, ended up getting a law degree, going off to New York and working for the DA's office, the first woman, the first gay person, openly gay person to work for the district attorney of Manhattan. But she, you know, Manhattan was Manhattan. She came back to Austin to visit friends one winter and saw people going around barefoot and decided she's moving back. And so this woman would hang out at the Continental bar while she was redoing her house with her girlfriend. And once that got done, she's still hanging out at the bar. And she's looking across the street at this motel, which is a flop house, and it's full of, you know, people that are not necessarily upstanding citizens. And she just kind of, you know, visualizes it. You know, I'm done with this redo. I want to do that one. So Liz Lambert bought the San Jose motel for about $300,000. Got, you know, went deep into debt. Had her friend Steve give her a lot of advice on rehabbing and basically reopened the motel after making a documentary about it, which is another Austin thing. She opened the Hotel San Jose, which ushered in a whole new era of gracious accommodations and lodging. I mean, Liz has opened the St. Cecilia, which is Austin's most expensive hotel. Opened it up, and it's always packed with rock bands. The big bands are playing ACL Fest. She's done El Cosmico in Marfa, La Habana in San Antonio. And basically, she's basically redefined how people, it's casual, but it's chic, and it's a look. It's kind of a South Austin look. But Liz and Steve kind of headed up the bottom-up gentrification of South Congress. And at one point in the 90s, the city tried to come in and say, you need light rail. And all these independent businesses thought it, said, look, we're independent businesses. We're here because the rent's cheap. And you're gonna disrupt our business for a year or two to build rail. And then when that's built, we can't afford to be here. We're against this. So they fought off the rail, which is one of the few, it's counterintuitive, because that street really does need rail now. But the gentrification has happened to the point, a lot of these original businesses, if they didn't own their real estate, they had to move to farther places out. And that's kind of the whole evolution that this was, what's happening in Austin is, it choked on its success. It's become big. It's this thing called ATX, completely made up. The airport designation is AUS, not ATX. And it's a silly thing, but this is, it's now become, Austin is a brand. So C.B. Stubblefield from Lubbock, who starts Stubbs Barbecue, and becomes a music mentor to all these Lubbock people, follows Joe Ely and Butch Hancock and Carrie Allen, Jimmy Dale Gilmore, all these folks, down to Austin and sets up shop. And he tries to do his barbecue fairly unsuccessfully, but towards the end of his life, he starts, at the urging of Kimmy Rhodes, the wife of Joe Gracie, great Fort Worther, and Sharon Ely, Joe Ely's wife, started urging Stubbs, and they did little hand-labeled bottles of Stubbs barbecue sauce and started selling it. And Stubbs got on David Letterman's show. He got some renown. He didn't really make any money, but there were people that took over his business, started a club called Stubbs, a barbecue. Well, McCormick Foods bought Stubbs barbecue sauce 2 years ago for $100 million. This is the commodification and branding of Austin. So Austin's turned into a brand. C3 presents these concert promoters that they are these guys that were trying to do concerts, but they all got together and were organized by none other than Lance Armstrong. And I wasn't going to write about Lance in this book because, you know, he's kind of like, this is heroism and celebrity gone bad. He's the second one named superstar in Austin, but he lied. We all know that. But what he wasn't getting any credit for is after he started winning these Tour de France races, after the second one, he said, I don't want to do parades anymore. This is Austin. Let's get some bands in here. Because when Lance moved from Plano to Austin in the early 80s, there was no cycling scene. It was just, this was the one place he could live in Texas and still be near his mom. He couldn't afford to move to California or Colorado. So he wins these Tour de France bike races, he makes cycling a big deal. Everybody's wearing yellow jerseys in Austin and all this. And so the third Tour de France victory becomes a concert, it's a party. And this is a pretty good idea. They pulled it off several times where there's over 100,000 people. Congress Avenue, listen to Steve Miller and all these great bands play, Robert Earl King. He does it several times and does it well enough that his business managers take these people that have put on these productions and they start doing concert promotions. So Capital Sports becomes Capital Sports and Entertainment. And these free promoters become C3 Presents. And they're local guys that just have been doing concert promotion. C3 Presents by 2008 becomes, does all the campaign events for a presidential candidate named Barack Obama. And end up doing all the presidential events for Obama when he's president. I mean, C3 Presents is all these things. And they just sold 51% of their business to Live Nation last year for, I think, 51. So money has become an object in Austin. And that raises my question. You come today to Austin, and are you going to have the same aha moment that I had in 1973 after I got through the roaches? And I used, I have to use the Broken Spoke as my great example, which is a honky tonk on South Lamar. And has persisted. My wife, my girlfriend then, Chris, worked as a waitress there in the 70s. So we got to know James and Annetta White, and it was one of about, probably 15 honky-tonks around Austin. Well, today it's really the last one left. And it's surrounded by condos. So if Broken Spoke used to be on the end of town, and now it's like, it's in the middle of the city. City's grown around it. And so old-timers like me will go drive by and go, God, I hope it hangs on. Isn't that a pity what's happened around it? Okay, that's fine. As an old fart, I have all the reason in the world to complain. Because I'll tell you, no matter where your place is, if Fort Worth's your place, at one point you came to the conclusion, this is my place. And at one point in 1973, it came to my aha moment. It was Austin. This is my place. And the minute you decide that, it's going downhill from there on, because your place is always going to change. And change is constant. So it'll never be as good as the first time or what you first saw. Still, it's going to be plenty good. So I was trying to put myself in the shoes of someone today who's 20, 21, 22 years old like I was when I moved, and they're coming in for the first time, maybe land at the airport, someone's driving them down South Lamar, and there's these these patios where people are drinking beer, there's restaurants, it's real zoomy looking. And then all of a sudden, how cool is this? In the middle of all these condos, a genuine Texas honky tonk. Man, I'm home. I found my place. So it's all relative. That's not to say Broken Spoke that it was to me, but it can be that moment for somebody else. And that's where I'm hopeful, but I have reason to be also a little bit hesitant, because I do think Austin is choking on its own success. And there's a loss of a lot of these institutions that helped make it what it is today. And that loss is troubling. But at the same time, I did an event back in May, and it was at the Google building. I didn't know there was a Google building in Austin. And it's the first of 2 Google buildings, and they're both like over 30 stories tall. And I had to go find it, and in fact, I parked in the wrong building, and I ended up having to pay like $40 to get out of the parking lot. The Google building, it's like, that's pretty cool. And what are they doing? There's scooters now, and there's a lot of things. Being an old timer that I don't like what I'm seeing. But I can still go to Schultz's on any given afternoon when the sun's shining. And it remains that place. It's magic. And Barton Springs, I will go out of my way to get into, especially this time of year, because constant temperature. And it's, to me, it really is an oasis. Of course, I've kind of cheated. I'm an older guy, and my wife and I got ahead of the sprawl in 1993, and we moved out beyond Wimberley. And my Barton Springs now is the Blanco River, and it's my job to keep it clean and control it and be the control of the slide bridge. But, I've died and gone to heaven, I'm just living it. And I found my place, but even as I live out in the country, I see more armadillo and squirrels than I do see people on a given day. Austin's my city and remains there. And when I go in, it's like, once I get in past the traffic, which is a huge problem, I think it's still pretty cool. I'll use the example of my friend Roland Swinson. Roland I met in 1979. I was managing a band. I quit writing for 5 years. I hadn't quit yet, but I was advising this band my girlfriend was playing in, called Joe King, Carrasco, and the Crowns. And they couldn't get any. There was a club called Rolls, the punk club. The only reason Joe King could even get in the club was because it was owned by Joseph Gonzalez, and they understood Joe King's Tex-Mex. They loved his music, and they understood polkas. The punks did not. But Roland managed a band called Standing Waves, and they were kind of a Talking Heads type band, one of the best draws and rolls. And I was lucky enough to get Joe King to get some opening gigs for Standing Waves. And during the breaks out in the parking lot, Roland and I would always talk. It's like, how do you do this? How does this business work? How do you get a band like this signed? What labels are signed here? Who's in New York or who's in LA, whatever. Roland and I would always talk about this. Well, within a year, Standing Waves were opening up for Joe King in New York. Joe King kind of busted through and did real well. And Roland eventually moved the band Standing Waves to New York for a couple of years, and he was active. And then he moved back to Austin, had a music management company, distributed Austin Chronicle weeklies in order to pay the bills while we're all being band managers. But basically, he stayed active in his management thing. And taught me this question: how do you get your foot in the door with the business, especially when you're in Austin, Texas? So he convinced this convention called the New Music Seminar in New York, which happened every year, to do a satellite conference in Austin one year. But these organizers of the New Music Seminar were so screwed up, and they had way too much illicit drug use. I mean, they were over the top. They canceled like 2 months out. We're not going to do this satellite conference. Roland went to the publisher and the editor of the Austin Chronicle, and he went, this is something that didn't happen up to this time, he went to the Austin Convention and Visitors Bureau, which generally that's the man, they're the people, you don't mess with them. He went to them and he said, I really would like to do this. And through the Austin CVB, you know what, you're right, we're seeing this music is good for the economy. I tried to do an economical impact of what music meant to the economy of Austin in 1978. I was at the Austin Statesman. I remember calling up the Chamber of Commerce and I said, you have any idea about the impact of music on the local economy? And the answer was no. Things had changed back in the mid-'80s, and Roland went to the CVB. Would you give us some money to help put this thing on? They said, you know what, we're seeing there's some traction here. Let's do it. And so the very first South by Southwest was held. And the reason, it was set up for music, and it was set up for the purpose of connecting people, networking, aspiring artists, creatives with the business. And of course, what South by Southwest is today is something, yeah, there's still a music component, but every fortnight in March, any new idea in film and in technology and in music, or anything new that's being trotted out for those consumer groups of those, happens in Austin. The world comes to Austin for all things alternative because of South by Southwest. It's a beast. It's over the top. If you've never done it before, I don't recommend even trying to get into it anymore. It's over the top. It gridlocks the city. And I keep kidding Roland. I said, I'm not waiting on the governor or the mayor to come up with transportation solutions. You're going to come up with it because you want to keep this thing running. And they do come up with some solutions. They still haven't fixed traffic in Austin. But when I look at all of these things, South by Southwest is that one deal, along with Austin city limits, that became the window of Austin to the world. The rest of the world can see what's happening in Austin. If you're watching Austin City Limits, you're learning about music. And there again is the transition from a simple program that was going to show off Austin talent and Nashville talent now shows off the best music in the world. And they have their own theater. All that, by the way, is because of Lance Armstrong. And Lance put money to do C3 Presents in once EFC presents Let's Do a Festival, they went to Austin City Limits, the TV show, to get branded. We want to use your name so we can put on this festival. We'll give you money. You're always short on equipment. We'll give you enough you can build a whole new theater downtown. And all that happened. And that was because of Lance just wanted to hear more music. So again, we're doing things for all the wrong reasons in Austin. And I hope, despite all the business aspects that do drive the city now, and money is a factor, because creatives have been priced out of the city. Creatives are like firefighters, school teachers, policemen. They may be important to defining the city, but they can't afford to live there anymore. And a positive is the mayor, the council, everyone agrees we need to get these strategies. Business leaders form these organizations to try to figure out how do we keep creatives in here. So at least they've identified the problem, but they haven't come up with a solution. But do you choke on your own success? My thinking is sort of. And what I'm seeing now is the new creative spots for this area. One of the good parts is I'm not going to be able to afford to live in Austin, but Lockhart has become like, it's full of musicians, it's filthy with musicians. I like to say Wimberley, where I live near, is kind of the Marin County to San Francisco. That Austin being Austin, people move out to Wimberley, and it's kind of like where you have retired musicians living. And it's got a fair amount of writers in the community there too. But it's all Austin. Austin is that spark that makes it happen. And it's about all these small communities that kind of started up, whether it's the Film Society and how that played upon music, and how today technology uses music. You can't go into a high-tech company in Austin without seeing music posters and billboards, even though most of the folks that are working there are doing these 80-hour high-tech work weeks, and they don't even go hear music. So they're trying to honor the tradition that built Austin, but can you still have that? Is that still a vital part? I don't know. But I do know that it's kind of diffusing and spreading, and all I know is I'm still here. My wife and I keep talking about, well, you know, we are of retirement age. We can go anywhere. It's a big world. We love to travel. I'm half Greek, and I've got kinfolk that have always said, you want to go live, you know, we've got room at our place. You don't want to move here, fine. And there's a lot of temptation, but, you know, for all the bitching and moaning and, oh, it's not the same anymore. I am where I am by choice and for a reason. It still is that place. And I've been very lucky to have been in that place during a particular time that's let me tell the stories I have on Stevie Vaughan, on Willie Nelson, and on Austin ATX and all these other people. And I couldn't have done it if I hadn't come from here. So I have no authority to do any of this stuff. I'm a college dropout, 5 colleges, and I'm not even a junior. Which is to say, I'm authorizing every one of you all, and I know you all, independent historian, call me what you may, but we're all historians, and we're all telling stories. And part of our jobs as historians is to catch some of those stories and get them before they disappear, because they go off into the ether pretty quick when people leave this earth. So I'm still driven, and to come back here and to hear about trying to figure out where downtown Como was. But yeah, that was about 4 blocks down from the Bluebird, where they had the Como Theater. You know, talk about old clubs on the TJ's Chicken in the Basket and the Silver Slipper down here on East 4th Street, the Bottoms, which was a magical place. You could hear Freddie King for $2 when he was charging, you know, $25 to play a big hall. And actually, Freddie was double dipping, as something was telling me yesterday. He would play frat gigs in Fort Worth, and he'd have a white band backing him up at the frat gig. He'd take a break and go over to TJ's Chicken in the Basket, where he'd play with Lil Al and the Hi-Fis for a set, and then he'd go back and play another set. And I got to admire a man that's that creative. Fort Worth's got so many stories, and Fort Worth is such an under-the-rug thing. The best stories, you got to lift up that rug and look for it. It's not on the surface. Don't let the surface fool you. It's a great surface, but what's bubbling up underneath? These stories are larger than life, and they define this city, just like the stories I tried to tell here define Austin. So thank you all for your time, and thank you for listening to my But this is going nowhere if we don't have some, I can monologue forever. But let's have some dialogue. Y'all have some questions or comments? Yes?
Nick, this is
Brad.
Yeah, how are you?
Pretty good, how are you?
Very good. You're a proud native of Chamberlain, Arlington Heights, right?
Yes.
Do you have any good stories about Horn Street and the music scene there? You mentioned the theater, which I don't know much about. Can you speak about that?
Well, it's, you know, to me, that opened up a world to me. And in high school, we had charity clubs, and I was, in my charity club, they were nothing but fraternities and excuses for drinking. The school board was right to try to get rid of us. But, you know, we'd have dances and all that, and, you know, bands like Crowd Plus One and the Elite. That whole rock and roll scene has actually been captured by Norton Records in New York as the Fort Worth scene in the 60s was one of the great teen scenes anywhere. That was fun. But I was also going, I remember being on the front row seeing James Brown at the Will Rogers Coliseum, and I was the only person not of color in the crowd, and things like that were kind of pushing me in that direction. And when I met Mike Buck, who had gone to Brewer, and we were about the same age, Mike was playing in this band, and he invited me to come watch Robert Ely and his Five Careless Lovers at Mabel's Eat Shop, which was across the street from the Bluebird nightclub. And as Sumter Breeden was saying yesterday, it was kind of it was a step down. Going to the Bluebird was like going uptown. But there was a scene, and there were blues clubs. Sumter was saying that the Bluebird was originally a jazz club. And this is, you know, the story of I Am Terrell and what came out of the Black High School in Fort Worth, and no knock on Dunbar, but I Am Terrell had such a great music legacy of these people that came up out of the marching band. I interviewed Dewey Redman, great sax player at the Armadillo World Headquarters around 77 or 78. He was playing with a band called Old and New Dreams, which were these musicians that had been sidemen to this player named Ornette Coleman. Ornette Coleman was a Fort Worth native as well. He came up out of I Am Terrell, as did the great King Curtis Owsley, Cornell Dupree, C.L. Dupree, all these people. And when I was talking to Dewey, you know, and he was playing full time as a jazz player, but he'd been teaching at a black high school in Bastrop. And I asked him, I said, "You ever hear of the Bluebird nightclub?" Because I was really into it. That was the first record review that I got a hate letter for. In Buddy Magazine, the very first issue, I reviewed Robert Ely and his Five Careless Lovers. And I just said, you know, you rock and roll people don't know what you're talking about. This is real music. And someone took the time to write a letter saying I didn't know what I was talking about. And it was a giveaway magazine. That was so great. But Dewey Redman, I said, "Have you ever been to the Bluebird?" And Dewey said, "Oh yeah, man, back in the 40s and early 50s, we all were there." He said, "I think I saw Ornette walk the bar there." And for Ornette Coleman, who was known as this free jazz experimentalist, he was, you know, he was so out there when he arrived in New York in the late 1950s. It was an argument whether he was a genius or an idiot savant. No one seemed to know. But so that jazz tradition was kind of a new thing with me, that there were people playing jazz, and then there were people playing low-down country blues. And those were two different kinds of blues, but they were both going on in Fort Worth. And what was on top of that, even though segregated society, you had the New Gym Hotel downtown, Black Hotel. Any black actors playing Dallas or Fort Worth would stay at the New Gym Hotel. And so there were these storied after-hours jams at the New Gym where members of the Texas Playboys would show up, and they could jam with black musicians after hours. No one was looking. And I remember talking with Stephen Bruton about this. We were talking about the gym, these jams, and he said, "Yeah, but did you ever hear about the cemetery jams?" And his eyes grew wide, and he said, "Yeah." He's talking about Westertown, these cemeteries. And he'd always heard stories about Playboys and Milton Brown's musical brownies would engage with black bands. And they go to a cemetery, turn on their car lights so they could illuminate, and they all sit down and play out of purview of everybody. So
What cemetery west of Fort Worth? Wouldn't be the Como Cemetery.
No, he's talking about going up much farther out of like Weatherford and beyond. But you know, that's where musicians would do. Laws were laws. You know, whether they're drug laws or whether they're segregation laws, musicians never let those technicalities get in the way of doing music. And that's, I love those stories where we transcend, you know, our terrible racist, segregationist history, and yet you come up with these stories. And the story that I've heard about Robert Johnson playing with the house band at the Blackstone Hotel when he was doing a story recording in Dallas. I mean, you know, you want to go down that rabbit hole, we can. I would love to do some, I don't know where this is going to go with Sumter, but I'm going to try to build some history of that one band, Robert Ely and his Five Careless Lovers, because it was a salt and pepper thing. Blacks and whites were going into a black club and it was okay. And that was not the case at Bluebird beforehand. It wasn't, maybe one or two whites could show up, especially if you're in the band, but people didn't go to enjoy, you know, to enjoy the music like they did. And that scene, that was my first Texas Monthly article that I wrote of length, was about Robert E. Lee and his Five Careless Lovers, and I think I ended it where he's doing the duck walk, where he walked across. He had kind of a real squat walk, but where high society was all squat, walking right behind it. And, you know, that was the beauty of Robert E. Lee. Music does things to people that make them happy.
Nick, is that why they call it the new Bluebird? Because you have a mix of people, you have people coming from all over the west side.
You know, I don't know. The new part is a lot of joints would stick new in front of it. In fact, I saw a thing for this TJ's Chicken in the Basket, which really was a tore down club down in the bottoms. And at one time it became the new Chicken in the Basket.
They applied the new after the Bluebird's original building, which was a discarded trolley car, was replaced with new construction.
There it is. Mike Price has the real estate. And see, this is history. And history's lived. This may be, we're talking about something that happened 40 years, not even that long ago, but something way back in the past. And you start talking with people, and you know, all this is important stuff to me. But it's low art. And this is what I concentrated on this book. There's very little about the real university's role or leaders of the university or the state. They're stories, and these are, it's all underground. But I make the argument, as far as Austin goes, Austin's economy is defined by its culture, unlike any other city in at least Texas. The rest of Texas is grown cattle, extracted natural resources. That's what's built Texas in its economy. The creative mind is what's built Austin the last 50 years. And I've seen that transition. And it's completely creative mind. That's what Google and Facebook and all those other knucklehead tech companies are doing. And, you know, that's kind of the gripe now. It's like these techies have all this money. And, you know, all the time you see these 23, where do they get their money? How are they living this way? But it's brought a whole different kind of identity to the city. But it's still culture-driven in my mind. Questions? Oh, come on, y'all.
Oh, I'll have one.
All right, come on. Hi.
You should plug the Texas Music Hour for Power tonight.
Paula Dean Cranham here from Spring.
Hazel.
I'm always getting mixed up. Now, because Austin's former mayor, Kirk Watson, is from Springtown, and I always sticking with, he's from Boswell, and I'm always sticking with Springtown. Everybody's got a hobby. I'm a writer, and I love music. I don't stop my curiosity. My whole thing is curious. You know, I get to stick my nose into things and ask questions. Come up to strangers, you know, tell me everything you know. And if I'm good at it, if I can run a good con, I'm going to get you to do all that. But my hobby, I don't golf, I don't hunt, fish. I swim the Blanco River. But my hobby is I put together a radio show that airs every Saturday. And I spend way too much time on it for being a hobby, but it's called the Texas Music Hour of Power. Now, Charlie Smith here, and Paula Dean Cranham up there, and Chuck Williamson here, they're all, and Steve Crawford, they're all listeners to the show. They're what we call image wranglers. So if you go on my Facebook page, when the show airs at 7 to 9 p.m. on marfapublicradio.org out of Marfa, and now in Wimberley Valley Radio is carrying it, and all these other stations, little bitty tiny stations. But when it airs at 7 o'clock on my Facebook page, all the image wranglers gather. I've given them my playlist, and they stick up images that relate to the music I'm playing, whether they're the bands that are playing, or the artist, or the record. And so it's the weirdest community that when I talk about it, it kind of just, it amazes me, and that people have never known each other except through the show, have met each other, become friends, and hang out. And I've had some of them out in my swimming hole, and gotten to swim with me. And I do this all from, the show is, it's all Texas music, but it goes back to the beginning of recorded music to the present. And I'm being a smartass. I'm trying to show you all the different kinds of Texas music there are, and like how much I know and how weird it can get. But I'm also using border radio. The old X stations from Mexico is kind of an inspiration. So I sell, instead of selling autographed pictures of Jesus Christ, I'm selling, I do sell radio spiritual prayer cloths for a good faith donation. And I'll let you know whether the donation is sufficient enough or your good faith is good enough. And I'm selling air. I sell salvation through Texas music. And that's what this cap says, salvation through Texas music. Thank you, Charlie. But it's community, and it's like, look, all I know is I like putting this stuff together because I'm always looking for music. I'm always on the hunt. And as I've told someone earlier, my head right now is the late 1940s in Houston. And what was going on in there was like, it was crazy. It was off the charts. Steve?
Yeah, when I was in Austin in the 70s, there was, there was some themes like don't trust anybody over 30 and generation gap. And now we're kind of long in the tooth. What about the younger generation, under 30? Do we not trust anybody under 30 now? Or?
No, it's all those in their 30s are going, okay, boomer. There's a kind of a clash, and this is where, again, I had to work really hard. A lot of people my age are if they've been in Austin for a while, are bitter, and they're angry. We're out, we're getting priced out, we're getting taxed out. They don't want us here anymore. They want to do high rises and all this other stuff. So there's a divide. And I don't think the 30s think that way at all. I think it's more like a lot of people my age don't trust anyone under 30 now, because those kids don't. No, and that was part of my motivation for this is I would like to think if a place is special and distinct and unique, a new arrival might want to know about it. How did it get this way? How did it become so cool? And probably the biggest compliment I can say, the first night I did an event was at the Austin Public Library. It was wild. I've had library people tell you, we didn't have a crowd like that since. And it was a big crowd. It was wild. But taking questions, the very last question was a woman right down front who, I think she was 55 years old. She said, I just moved from Minneapolis a week ago. And I said, well, how do you like it? She said, well, I rode my bike down from 38th Street, and I got my library card, and I'm here in this brand new, beautiful library. What's not to like? Well, she shows up at an event like 2 weeks later at Waterloo Records. And she said, my boyfriend's over there. And it turns out someone else told me that boyfriend of hers is 15 years younger than she is. But her boyfriend was part of the U.S. Army Futures Command, which just set up shop in Austin. And the idea is Army wants to develop technology, and they want to use small software developers. They want to take advantage of the small mom and pop. And that's really where the action is in Austin as far as technology. Yeah, there's Google and saying some, but the action is all these software developers, game developers on that level. And so, they're tuning right into that. The Army wants to move. And the woman told me that he's not going to come over and introduce himself, but he just bought 50 books for the U.S. Army's Futures Command. And I felt honored. Because it's like, that's kind of what I'm after. And so I've spoken, it's been the textbook of a couple all ATX leadership conference classes, these leadership deals where they all get together and try to become leaders. So they've used the book as a textbook. And I keep telling all these people, I said, okay, you're in the position, don't screw it up. Yes, sir.
You already have a history book of Fort Worth based on your Willie book. And a good portion of that takes place in Fort Worth.
My favorite part, because when I was going to do Willie's book, I got the deal before I signed, before I talked to Willie. and I didn't know if he's gonna talk to me, but I read Bud Schrake's autobiography and went through all his papers at the Whitman collection, and then talked to Bud. And what I was looking for is what Willie left out of his story. And Fort Worth was a big hole, and fascinating period. I'm still trying to visualize Willie and Roger Miller running around those joints on the north side, just getting looped and trying to, pick up a gig. Roger had a fill in Willie, had a guitar. Willie smoking weed for the first time behind the stagecoach inn. Willie on KNCN, and doing the Western Express radio show, and not only just playing music, but playing along to the music. And then, playing on his own, playing live, which is where he meets Paul English. And Paul English's story, I got to tell not just in the book, but I did a standalone piece on Paul English for Oxford American about 4 years ago, and it's one of my favorite magazine articles. If Paul was Paul in his 30s, I wouldn't have written it. I would have been scared. Paul's in his 80s, and I don't feel, and I think I handled it well. But that period of characters in Fort Worth in the 1950s, what is it? And what's her name? The Gangsters and Gamblers book. I'd like to think there's another book there that could be expanded upon that. But again, I think we're now reaching that point in history. There's not enough living witnesses. I got Pat Kirkwood before he died, who ran the cellar and who talked about it, his daddy on the Four Deuces. And I went to a cellar reunion I wrote about for Texas Monthly. And that's Fort Worth. And that didn't happen anywhere else. Yes, ma'am.
Owen Temple's got a really good song about the Jacksboro Highway.
And Owen Temple said he wrote that song after he read the Willie book. He told me that, and I was very flattered, because I don't think he ran the Jacksboro Highway.
I think it's time we probably wrap things up here and get around to a book signing.
Okay, yeah, they're pulling me off. But listen, thank you all for being here. I can't thank you enough.